Welcome to the first episode of LAMP, the podcast about the human experience, illuminating the human experience one conversation at a time. This idea, this feeling, and this calling to do this podcast has been in my heart and soul for several years, and for a myriad of different reasons I've avoided it, ran away from myself, distracted myself with safety, security, work, a different career, and made all those usual experiences to run from myself that we so often can do as a human. And to be honest, I'm nervous and a little scared to put this out there. This is something I've wanted, as I said, for several years, and I believe now more than ever we need authentic stories, humanity, heartfelt visions, and with everything going on in the world, everything about advertising, AI, and this lack of inauthenticity on social media, I want this to cut through. I want to share parts of myself. I will be interviewing people in the future and talking about the human experience. Because let's be honest, being a human's a fucking weird thing. And my life has been a journey of discovering what that means for me. And I've always sought big experiences that scare me and shape me. And I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of personal growth. And I've fucked up a lot. And I've had success and failures and rebuilds, and I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I am the phoenix coming out of the ashes, and I want to share this journey, and I'm going to start that. I want this to be raw. And a few years ago I went through a divorce. I was living in New York. I had a successful business, a photography media agency in real estate, producing marketing assets for the real estate industry there. And the pandemic happened and a breakup happened, and I left New York and I went to Estonia, and I spent the better part of 2 months in a little cottage in a seaside village with a population of 40, nestled between a forest and the Baltic Sea. And I just needed time for healing and time to go inward. I wrote a whole series of essays about experiences I've been through and the lessons or the principles that I've drawn from them. And today I want to read one of those, and it's all about grief, loss, love, overcoming ourselves, feeling called, and just what it means to be a human in this strange short moment in time that we get on this earth. Here goes. I'm writing this from a cottage in a tiny village of Kazmu, Estonia. It's a quiet place nestled in a bay on the Baltic Sea. On one side is the seaside, on the other a huge forest. My cottage is humble and cozy. The fire is crackling away on this cooler October afternoon. This is an experience I've wanted for the better part of a decade, and it's happening right now. Life is always happening for me, not to me. There's always clues, signs, synchronicities, serendipitous moments guiding me when I choose to see them. And they're not always obvious or pretty little signposts saying, "This way to happy lane." Sometimes they've been kicks in the ass pushing me back on my track. There's been books, people, animals, numbers, literal signs, songs, gut feelings, intuition, opportunities, wins and losses, a whole myriad of different ways in which I've been guided or sometimes pushed back on my path. After living in Peru and New York back in 2012, I returned to Australia, my home country, in January of 2013. I moved to a place I'd never lived before, but I felt close to. My dad, my biological father, was from there. He lived there somewhere at the time. I didn't know where. It It had been over a decade that I'd been in touch with him by this time. His 4 kids, my siblings and their mum, my stepmom, all lived there. I only got to meet them for the first time when I was 20 and had never lived near them. I'd only spent time with them for short periods on holidays. There was something inside me that felt strongly to move to Melbourne. I wanted to better know the paternal side of my story, my identity. And in the 4.5 years I lived there, I got more of that than I ever expected. Things came full circle. Life has this wonderful way of giving us what we need. Not always what we think we want, but always what we need. I got a job right away. I had a wonderful home with my family for the first 6 months. I had great friends. I went to acting school. I found great mentors. I worked as a photographer. Had ups, had downs, had my heart open, had my heart broken, had fallouts with family, was technically homeless for a period. Although I never slept on the street, I had great friends who supported me through that. I traveled, I explored, I grew, I learned, I forgave, I grieved, I healed. In November of 2016, after what I call the homeless period, I was back on my feet, rebuilding my life on the rock-bottom foundation that the prior months had given me. It was the time in my life that I accepted that life happens for me, not to me. I was changing. There's my life before that period and my life after. It was a very defining moment for me, a stepping into my man of sorts, taking responsibilities for what stories I wanted to write in my life. I was doing it all. Exercising, meditating, taking ice baths, affirmations, journaling, therapy, all of it. Whatever the fuck I could do to find that I ensured that I never, ever went back to that place. One day I got the instinct to call an old friend in Poland. We hadn't spoken in months and months. Dorota is her name. We met in Peru. She lived in Melbourne for a bit, and now she was back in Poland, her home country. It was one of those phone calls that was full of magic and synchronicity. Crazily, or in hindsight, perhaps not, her journey these past months shared a lot of parallels to mine. She had had some wake-up calls and was also shifting gear. She told me she was moving to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Why, I asked. My boyfriend got a job there. With curiosity, I questioned, what are you going to do there? She was a photographer and a graphic designer, and now she was moving to Southeast Asia because her boyfriend got a job there? And then came the moment that changed it all. She told me she was in her final stages of interviews with a company called Mindvalley. Fuck, what? Just a week prior, I had stumbled across a video on YouTube of their founder and CEO, Vishen Lakhiani, talking about meditation. What are the chances? Dorota and I hadn't spoken in months. Unbeknown to each other, we had both been through some crazily similar life learnings, and now here we are on the opposite side of the world having a phone catch-up, and she tells me she's going to work for this company, Mindvalley, that I just so happened to discover a week prior. I mean, come on. Fast forward a couple of months and I get a call from her. She's now moved to Kuala Lumpur and started to work with Mindvalley. Straight away on the start of the phone call, she almost just blurts out, you've got to come and work here. You've got to join Mindvalley. I feel so strongly in my soul that this is for you. There was something in that moment, it hit me, a spark. It was like a little explosion went off inside and woke me up. I can't exactly remember what I was going through or where my head and heart were at this moment, but I do know I was calling in more growth and opportunity into my life. That was the deep journey I was on at this time. Without hesitation and with Dorota still on the other end of the line, I quickly Googled jobs in Mindvalley. Searching through the 20-something list of job vacancies, I found a job that A, I was interested in, and B, felt I could do, or at least learn. Videographer. Sure, I'll give it a crack. This was more about wanting the experience of being in this environment than it was about the actual job. But life happens for us, not to us. And somehow, there's always greater plans for us at work if we just get the fuck out of our own way. Around this time, January 25th, 2017 to be exact, I was ironing my shirt and getting ready to go to a Jan Tiersen concert. I checked the time on my phone and saw that I had a few missed calls within a period of 10 minutes from my stepmom. Shit. What could it be? I immediately called back. She proceeded to tell me that the police had called her and that my dad had been found in a park, unconscious, and was in the intensive care unit at the hospital. With no family or friends in contact with him, they needed a next of kin. She asked if I'd be that. I hadn't grown up with him, nor had him in my life like they had. From all accounts, he was an absolute asshole to her and my siblings. Angry, drugged out, drunk, violent, mean, all of it. I said yes. I was the oldest son, and at this stage of my life, I felt I was the best to be able to handle that. Fuck, man. None of us had contact with him for years. We didn't know where he lived, nor what he was up to. My stepmom had a restraining order against him, which was how the police were able to contact her through the court records. And just a few years prior, my sister happened to sit across from him on a train. He looked at her and didn't even recognize her, his own daughter. So many times in the 4 years that I'd been living in Melbourne, I would see a bummed out, bearded old man and think, is that my dad? And there was always a part of me that still hoped and held on to this hope that one day I would have that father-son relationship with him. It never happened. Right after that phone call, I was on the phone to the police and doctors. They told me he was being kept alive by machines and didn't have long to live. So I made my way out to the intensive care unit where he was. And upon arriving at the hospital, the nurse explained to me in more detail what his situation was. He was brain dead. They had shaved his beard and his head. And he had tubes down his throat, pumping air into his lungs to keep him alive. And most importantly, that he wasn't going to make it through the night, that we'd have to turn off the machines. He was just down the hall from where I was standing, and I could see the entrance to his room. And breaking from the story, even as I remember this, as I'm reading it, this is burned in my mind forever. I can just see it so clearly. And I waited for my stepmom to arrive because I couldn't go in there alone. And when she arrived, I briefed her quickly. I held her hand and proceeded what seemed to be the longest 20-meter walk of my life. Straight ahead, the doctor and 2 nurses stood side by side out the front of his room, waiting for us like soldiers. We walked. 15 meters to go. 10. 5. 3. Shit got really strange for me at this point. I was about to see my dad for the second time in my life, and for the first time in nearly 21 years. With the final steps, we arrived at his room, and I still looked straight ahead, unable to turn my head to the left, and I had to physically take my hand and push my head to face his room. There he was, my dad, lying there, this sad, helpless body, barely alive. With trepidation, I slowly began to walk towards him. Like he was going to jump out at me or something, I kept my distance. As the moments went by, I came back into my body and I curiously started inspecting him. I noticed we had the same nose. I laughed to myself and thanked him because I like my nose. And after a little while, I asked to be alone with him to say my final words. It was an opportunity to let him know that a year earlier I'd forgiven him in an acting class. And that was a catharsis if there ever was one. Finally, I said to him, "You can go in peace now, old man." I turned to the doctors and gave my okay to turn off the machines. It was time. It was like a scene out of a movie. I stood there and I watched the heart rate monitor slow down. It was like beep, beep, beep. And it flatlined and he was gone. I truly hoped he found the peace that he had searched for his whole life. The following month was a journey of piecing together the last 20 years of his life. That combined with the dealing of the coroner's reports, the legalities of an autopsy, and finally organising his burial. And a month later, on February 27th, 2017, the day had come to lay him to rest. It was a state-paid funeral, no bells and whistles, and no pallbearers. Someone had to carry and lower his coffin into the burial ground, and that someone was me. I did not want to do it at all. The thought of carrying a dead body and lowering it into the ground when that dead body was my absent father, a man I didn't know. And I had such strong resistance. But thanks to the encouragement of one of my best mates, Loic, I stepped up and stepped through something incredibly difficult. What he said would be, stepping into my man. And as a side note, he'd always say, sometimes you got to do some real man shit, and it's not tough. It's just doing the difficult shit. And I did it. And at that moment, things came full circle for me once again. In the 4 years of living in Melbourne, a place that I'd come to understand and make peace with the paternal side of my family, I now lay that to rest, both literally and metaphorically. It was a defining moment within a defining period of my life, and where again, life happened for me, not to me. It provided this opportunity for me to step into myself, beyond myself. And back to life and on with the show I went. I finished my application for Mind Valley and submitted it. And I got an interview. I did a video editing test. And I should mention I'm a pretty shitty editor. And I finished it, handed it in, and I waited and waited and waited some more, and I didn't hear back for ages. Thinking to myself, it's like, fuck, I blew it, I thought. And but there was something in me. I felt so strongly called to this job, this place, this experience. It was for me. And there remained this level of hope. And then one day, a month or so later, maybe even 2 months, I get a reply finally. And it read, "Hi Luke, Apologies for the delay in getting back to you. Let's get the bad news out of the way. We've decided to move forward with someone else, but we still feel you'd be a great fit for the company, and there's an opportunity on the horizon. We'll be in touch. All I hoped and prayed for was that it was something that would be a role that combined all of this varied experience I had had before, and it helped me to grow into the next level of my career and also my life. That prayer was answered in the form of a role that was perfectly befitting to me. Workspace experience designer. Mindvalley were looking for someone who had a background in hospitality management and also had a great design aesthetic. Damn, that was me. With 10 years experience in hotel management and as a concierge, and mostly working recently in real estate and interior design photography, this role was a pretty amazing match. My perfect next career path had found me. My time in Melbourne was coming to an end. It was crazy to think that a year earlier I'd hit that rock bottom and had one of the lowest moments of my life. It had been a huge year of growth, rebuilding, rewiring, and listening. Learning to see signs, call in opportunities, and allow, keyword, for better things to flow my way, just to get out of my way. And after 6 months since I first applied, I was on my way. I wrapped up my life, packed my bags, said my goodbyes, and I was on a plane for Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Life is awesome. And as much as I had some expectations that things were going to be great, they got a whole lot more awesome. They were completely different from what I expected. This journey was just getting started. Thank you for listening. That period of my life was profound, and I think we go through different seasons of incubation and preparation, and I said at the start, it's like that phoenix coming out of the ashes, and I've been through some more of those these last couple of years. I went to Mindvalley, I met my wife there, we moved to New York together, had a great life, and then that came down, and then I went back to Australia again, and now I'm living in New Zealand, and I've been here a year, and I feel like I'm ready to launch this and finally share the next part of these chapters. And there's more stories I've written, and I want to hear from you and others and talk to people, and I really want to know if there's something in your life where your life has crumbled and burnt down and been at a place in your life where you're seemingly lost, but it was a rejection through to redirection and a preparation for something greater. Thank you. I look forward to sharing more, and I'm excited that I've finally done this. One last note. I just went for a little walk before this to prepare and ground myself, and I was saying a little prayer just for some peace, and I found this as I was walking. I don't know if that's going to focus there. There we go. It says, feeling overwhelmed, and I picked up the stone, and on the back of it says, God is always ready to help in times of trouble. And if there's anything that my life has been, it's been listening to those signs and trusting. So, thank you.